We've tried everything. This bird is dead. The young Marine corporal slammed his wrench against the tarmac in frustration as the V-22 Osprey sat silent and stubborn on the flight line. 3 days, 6 mechanics, countless hours, and still no solution. Then an old man in worn coveralls arrived, took one look, and said 4 words that changed everything. Check the fuel sensor. Type precision, if you believe decades of experience can solve what technology cannot. The heat shimmered off the tarmac at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, the California sun beating down on what had become a nightmare scenario for the maintenance crew. The V-22 Osprey, that magnificent tilt-rotor aircraft that could transform from helicopter to airplane mid-flight, sat grounded like a wounded bird. For 3 days, it had refused to start, its engines silent despite every diagnostic test, every procedure, every troubleshooting protocol in the manual. The aircraft was needed urgently for a training mission that had already been delayed twice, and pressure was mounting from command. 6 Marine mechanics, all certified on the V-22 system, all young and trained on the latest diagnostic technologies, had torn through every system they could think of. Nothing worked. Corporal Marcus Reed, 25 years old and the crew chief for this particular bird, was reaching the end of his rope. He'd barely slept in 3 days, his uniform stained with hydraulic fluid and jet fuel, his eyes red from staring at diagnostic screens. His team surrounded the Osprey like surgeons around an unresponsive patient, their frustration palpable. "Run the starter sequence again," Reed ordered, his voice tight. They did. The familiar whine of attempted ignition, then nothing, just dead silence. Sergeant Lisa Chen, the avionics specialist, looked up from her diagnostic tablet. "Marcus, I'm telling you, every system checks out. Power delivery is normal, fuel lines are clear, ignition systems are functioning. On paper, this aircraft should start." "But it doesn't," Reed snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. "Sorry, we're missing something fundamental and I can't figure out what." Another mechanic, Lance Corporal Jake Morrison, wiped sweat from his forehead. "Maybe we should just swap the engines entirely. That's the only thing we haven't replaced." Reed shook his head. "That's a week-long job minimum. Command needs this bird operational now." The frustration was morphing into desperation. These were good mechanics, well-trained, but they'd been taught to rely heavily on computerized diagnostics, on following decision trees and troubleshooting protocols. When those systems said everything was fine but the aircraft refused to start, they were lost. That's when the staff car pulled up. Colonel James Hartley emerged, followed by someone who made the young Marines pause. An elderly man, had to be pushing 80, climbed out slowly from the passenger seat. He wore faded blue coveralls that looked like they'd been worn through 1,000 maintenance shifts, steel-toed boots that had seen better decades, and a baseball cap with a faded Marine Corps emblem. His face was deeply lined, his hands gnarled and spotted with age, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body had absorbed years of hard labor. "Who's that?" Morrison whispered. "Probably some retiree the colonel's giving a tour to," Chen muttered. "Great timing." Colonel Hartley approached the gathered mechanics, his expression serious. "Status report, Corporal Reed." Reed straightened, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Sir, we've exhausted our diagnostic protocols. All systems test normal, but the engines won't turn over. We've checked fuel delivery, electrical systems, ignition, hydraulics. We've recalibrated the FADEC units twice. The computer says this aircraft should fly, but it won't start." Hartley nodded grimly, then gestured to the old man beside him. "This is Frank Kowalski. He's going to take a look." Reed tried to keep his expression neutral, but inside he was screaming. They'd been working on this problem for 3 days with the most advanced diagnostic equipment available, and Command was sending them a geriatric visitor? Morrison couldn't help himself. "Sir, with respect, we've had 6 certified mechanics working this problem around the clock. I'm not sure what a civilian could possibly contribute, Kowalski finished, his voice gravelly but sharp. That's what you were going to say, son? Morrison colored. I just meant, sir, that this is a complex aircraft with sophisticated systems. Kowalski nodded slowly, his eyes already scanning the Osprey. V-22. Twin Rolls-Royce turboshaft engines. Full authority, digital engine control, glass cockpit, fly-by-wire. Yeah, real sophisticated. His tone carried an edge that made Reed pay closer attention. Without asking permission, Kowalski walked directly to the aircraft, his gait slow but purposeful. The young mechanics exchanged glances, uncertain whether to stop him or let him proceed. Colonel Hartley simply nodded, giving silent approval. Kowalski circled the Osprey once, his eyes taking in details that seemed random to the observers. He stopped at the right engine nacelle, placed his weathered hand against it, then moved to the left. He knelt down, his joints protesting audibly, and looked underneath. Then he stood, walked to the cockpit access ladder, and climbed up slowly. Reed followed, concerned. Sir, Mr. Kowalski, the cockpit instruments show— I know what they show, Kowalski interrupted, settling into the pilot's seat with surprising familiarity. His hands moved across the instruments, not tentatively, but with practiced knowledge. He flipped several switches, watched the gauges, then climbed back down. The entire inspection had taken maybe 90 seconds. He walked back to where the mechanic stood, his expression thoughtful. Check your fuel quantity sensor in the right tank. It's giving false readings to the FADEC. The computer thinks you're empty when you're not, so it's cutting fuel delivery as a safety protocol. Your diagnostic system can't catch it because the sensor itself tests fine electrically. The problem is mechanical, a stuck float arm. Been that way for probably 3 days, right? Started after the last refueling? The silence was profound. Reed felt his stomach drop. We did refuel 3 days ago, right before it stopped working. Chen was already pulling up the fuel system schematics on her tablet, her fingers flying. But we checked the fuel sensors. They showed proper levels. Did you physically verify the fuel quantity or trust the gauges? Kowalski asked. The look on Reed's face was answer enough. Kowalski nodded. Common mistake. Technology makes you lazy. You see a green light, you trust it. Sometimes you need to physically look, touch, verify. Morrison spoke up, defensive now. But the FADEC system should compensate for sensor errors. That's what it's designed to do. Kowalski's smile was patient but firm. Should, yes. But the FADEC is only as good as the data it receives. If it thinks you're at bingo fuel, it's going to restrict flow to prevent catastrophic engine failure. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do, protect the aircraft from what it perceives as pilot error. Your diagnostic computer checked whether the sensor was functioning electrically. It was. So it passed, but nobody checked whether what the sensor was reporting matched reality. Reed was already moving, ordering his team to access the fuel sensor. Within minutes, they'd confirmed it. The sensor float was indeed stuck, giving readings that showed nearly empty tanks, when in fact, the Osprey was fully fueled. A simple mechanical failure that sophisticated electronics had masked rather than revealed. 20 minutes later, with the sensor freed and recalibrated, the Osprey's engines roared to life on the first try, their distinctive sound rolling across the flight line. The young Marine stood in stunned silence, processing the fact that 3 days of work had been undone by 30 seconds of observation from an old man they'd dismissed. Colonel Hartley let them absorb the moment, then spoke. Marines, gather around. There's something you need to know about Mr. Kowalski. The mechanics assembled, their earlier frustration now mixed with confusion and nascent respect. Hartley continued, Frank Kowalski isn't just a retired Marine. He's one of the original engineers who worked on the V-22 program when it was still in development at Bell Boeing in the 1980s. He spent 15 years as a flight test engineer, troubleshooting prototypes before most of you were born. Before that, he was a Marine helicopter mechanic in Vietnam. He's forgotten more about rotary wing aircraft than most people ever learn. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Reed felt his face burning. "Sir, Mr. Kowalski, I apologize. We didn't know. We assumed. You assumed an old man in coveralls couldn't possibly understand your fancy new aircraft," Kowalski said, not unkindly. "I get it. I look like someone's grandfather who should be fishing, not troubleshooting aircraft. But here's what you need to understand, Marines. Technology is a tool, not a crutch. Your diagnostic computers are incredible, but they can't think. They can't use intuition. They can't draw on decades of experience seeing every weird failure mode imaginable." He looked at each of them in turn. "You've been trained to follow protocols, to trust your instruments, to work through decision trees. That's good. That's important. But you've also been trained to stop thinking independently. The computer said the sensors were fine, so you believed it. You never questioned whether the sensor data was actually accurate. You never went back to first principles. Do we actually have fuel? You trusted technology over verification." Chen spoke up, her voice small. "How did you know to check that specific sensor? Just by looking?" Kowalski smiled. "Experience, mostly. I've seen that exact failure mode 3 times in testing. Back in the 90s, we had a prototype that did the same thing. The symptom pattern was identical. Everything tests normal, but the engines won't start. Plus, when I touched the nacelles, the right one was slightly cooler, suggesting less fuel vapor in that side system. And you said it started right after refueling. Put it together, and the fuel sensor was the logical culprit. But I could only make those connections because I've lived through them before, because I don't just trust what the computer tells me." Colonel Hartley took over. "Mr. Kowalski has agreed to spend some time with our maintenance crews, teaching old-school troubleshooting, the kind that doesn't rely solely on diagnostics. Because as this incident proves, sometimes the solution isn't in the manual or on the screen. Sometimes it's in experience and fundamental understanding." Reed stepped forward. "Sir, we'd be honored to learn from you, all of us. We clearly have a lot to learn about actually understanding these aircraft versus just following procedures." The other mechanics nodded emphatically. Morrison, who'd been most dismissive, spoke up. "Mr. Kowalski, I was wrong to doubt you, wrong to think age made you less capable. You solved in 30 seconds what we couldn't fix in 3 days. Please, teach us everything you can." Kowalski's weathered face softened. "I'm 78 years old, son. I move slow. I forget things sometimes, and I can't work 14-hour shifts like I used to. But what I can do is teach you to think like mechanics instead of just diagnostic technicians. Deal?" Over the following weeks, Frank Kowalski became a fixture at the Miramar maintenance hangars. He taught the young Marines to use their hands and eyes and ears, to feel for temperature differentials and listen for subtle sounds that computers couldn't detect. He taught them the history of common failure modes, the quirks of different systems, the importance of questioning even diagnostic results. Most importantly, he taught them that technology should enhance human judgment, not replace it. The Marines who'd initially dismissed him became his most dedicated students, recognizing that they'd almost lost access to irreplaceable knowledge because they'd judged by appearance rather than capability. The story of the Osprey that wouldn't start became legendary in Marine aviation maintenance circles, a cautionary tale about over-reliance on technology and the critical importance of experience. A photo from that day, showing Frank Kowalski in his worn coveralls explaining something to a circle of attentive young Marines, now hangs in the maintenance training facility with a simple inscription: "Trust but verify. Technology serves wisdom, not replaces it. Learn from those who've seen it all before." Subscribe to our channel if you believe that experience is irreplaceable, that true expertise transcends age, and that the moment we stop learning from those who came before us is the moment we guarantee we'll repeat their mistakes without understanding their solutions.